I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would lie to her own daughter about where I was going on a Tuesday afternoon. But there I was, at 61 years old, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with trembling hands, about to meet a man who wasn't my husband. A man who knew me before I became a wife, before I became a mother, before I became invisible. Let me take you back to where this all started, because I need you to understand that I'm not a bad person. My name is Eleanor, and for 38 years I've been married to Robert. We live in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, in a house with pale blue shutters and a garden I tend to every spring. We have 2 grown children, Michael and Sarah. Sarah just had her first baby 6 months ago, a beautiful little girl named Emma. I should be the happiest grandmother alive. Instead, I feel like I'm suffocating under the weight of a life that no longer fits. Robert retired 2 years ago from his accounting firm. I thought retirement would bring us closer together, that we'd finally have time for each other, after decades of raising kids and building careers. But instead, he spends his days in the garage restoring a vintage Mustang that he'll probably never drive. And I spend mine wondering when exactly I stopped mattering. When did I become just the woman who does the laundry and cooks the meals? When did he stop seeing me? 3 months ago, I joined Facebook. I know, I was probably the last person my age to finally give in, but Sarah kept insisting it would help me stay connected with old friends. And that's when I saw his name pop up in the People You May Know section, Daniel Archer. My heart actually stopped for a moment. Daniel, the boy I loved at 23 before I met Robert, the man I almost married. Before you judge me, let me tell you something. And if you're listening to this story and you understand what I'm feeling, please subscribe to this channel, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know there are other women out there who feel like they've lost themselves somewhere along the way. Daniel and I dated for 2 years in our early 20s. We met at a coffee shop near the University of Washington, where I was studying literature, and he was finishing his architecture degree. He had these intense green eyes that seemed to see right through me, and when he talked about building structures that would outlast us both, I felt like I was part of something bigger. We were passionate, alive, constantly arguing about books and politics and the meaning of life. We made plans to move to San Francisco together after graduation. But then, my father got sick. Cancer. He needed someone to help my mother take care of him, and I was the only child. I came back to Portland, and the distance between Daniel and me grew into something neither of us could bridge. He got a job offer in Chicago. I met Robert at a support group for families dealing with cancer. Robert was steady, reliable, present. When my father died, Robert was the one holding my hand at the funeral. Daniel sent flowers. I married Robert 6 months later. I told myself it was love. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just exhaustion and the desperate need to feel safe after watching my father waste away. Daniel sent a card to our wedding. I never responded. And now, 38 years later, there was his face on my computer screen. Older, with silver in his dark hair and lines around those green eyes, but still unmistakably him. My hand hovered over the Add Friend button for 3 days before I finally clicked it. He accepted within an hour. And then he messaged me. Eleanor, is it really you? I've thought about you so many times over the years. How have you been? I stared at those words for 20 minutes before responding. What was I supposed to say? That I'd spent nearly 4 decades in a marriage that had slowly drained the color from my life? That I couldn't remember the last time my husband had really looked at me, really seen me? Instead, I typed, I'm good. Married, 2 kids, 1 grandchild, living in Portland. You? His response came quickly. Divorced, no kids, still in Chicago, still designing buildings, still thinking about the girl who got away. That last sentence, those 7 words, they cracked something open inside me that I'd sealed shut decades ago. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever wondered what might have been, subscribe to this channel. Because what happened next changed everything, and I still don't know if I made the right choices. We started messaging every day. Innocent at first, talking about our lives, our work, his architecture projects, and my volunteer work at the local library. But slowly, the conversations grew deeper. He asked me questions Robert hadn't asked in years. What was I reading? What did I dream about? Did I still love poetry the way I used to? And I found myself staying up late at night, after Robert had gone to bed, sitting in the dim light of the kitchen with my laptop, telling Daniel things I hadn't told anyone. About how lonely I felt, about how I'd given up my dream of becoming a writer to raise my children, about how I sometimes looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. "You were always meant for more than this," Daniel wrote one night. "I remember how you used to talk about writing a novel. Did you ever do it?" I hadn't. I'd written exactly 43 pages 30 years ago, before Sarah was born, and then life had happened. Diapers and school meetings and soccer practices and Robert's long hours at the firm. The pages were still in a box in the attic, probably yellowed and forgotten. "I'd love to read what you wrote," Daniel said, "if you'd let me." Something shifted in me that night. I went up to the attic the next morning while Robert was in the garage. I found the box, pulled out those pages, and read them for the first time in decades. And you know what? They weren't terrible. They were raw and unpolished, but there was something alive in them, something real, something that felt more like me than anything I'd done in years. I sent them to Daniel. He read them in one sitting and called me. Actually called, which we hadn't done yet. I was in my car, parked at the grocery store. And when I heard his voice for the first time in 38 years, I started crying. "Eleanor, this is beautiful," he said. "You have to finish it. Promise me you'll finish it." "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "I know you can. I always knew you could." We talked for an hour about my writing, about his latest project, a community center in downtown Chicago, about the things we'd lost and the things we still wanted. And then he said something that changed everything. "I'm coming to Portland next month for a conference. Will you meet me?" I should have said no. I should have told him it was inappropriate, that I was married, that we needed to stop this before it went too far. But instead, I heard myself say, yes. I hung up the phone and sat in that parking lot for another 30 minutes, my groceries forgotten in the back seat. What was I doing? I was a grandmother, for God's sake. I had a responsibility to my family, to my marriage, to the life I'd built. But I also had a responsibility to myself, didn't I? To the woman I used to be, to the dreams I'd abandoned, to the part of me that had been slowly dying under the weight of being everyone's everything except my own person. If you're still with me, if you understand this feeling, please subscribe, because I need you to tell me if what I did next was unforgivable or if it was simply human. The weeks leading up to Daniel's visit were torture. I found myself oscillating between excitement and crushing guilt. I'd catch myself smiling at my phone when his messages came through, and then I'd see Robert sitting in his recliner, watching television, completely oblivious, and I'd feel sick. Sarah noticed something was different. She came over one afternoon with little Emma, and as I was making us tea, she said, "Mom, you seem different lately. Happier, maybe? Is everything okay?" How do you tell your daughter that you're happier because you're emotionally cheating on her father? That you're feeling alive for the first time in years because a man from your past is paying attention to you? "I'm fine, honey," I lied. "Just feeling good. Maybe it's the spring weather." She looked at me with those knowing eyes, so much like Robert's, and I had to turn away. I started taking more care with my appearance. Nothing drastic, but I got my hair trimmed and highlighted, started wearing clothes that weren't just comfortable but actually flattering. Robert noticed. "You look nice," he said one evening, glancing up from his phone. "Special occasion?" "No," I said. "Just felt like making an effort." He nodded and went back to scrolling through car parts websites. And I thought, this is what we've become. Strangers sharing a house. That night, I wrote Daniel a long email. I told him that maybe meeting wasn't a good idea, that I was confused and scared and didn't trust myself. I told him that I loved my family, even if I felt invisible in it. His response came at 2 a.m. I heard the notification ping on my phone and read it in the dark, with Robert snoring beside me. Eleanor, I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here because for 38 years, I've wondered what might have been. I'm here because when I talk to you, I remember who I used to be before life wore me down. If you don't want to meet, I'll respect that. But I think you need this as much as I do. Not to start an affair, not to blow up your life, but to remember that you exist outside of being someone's wife and mother. You're Eleanor, the woman who loved Sylvia Plath and argued with me about whether architecture was art. The woman who wrote 43 pages of something beautiful and then forgot about herself. Just coffee. 1 hour. Let yourself remember who you are. I read that message 17 times, and then I knew I was going to meet him. Subscribe to this channel if you want to know what happened when I did. Because the choice I made in that coffee shop 3 weeks later is something I'm still living with. The day finally came. Daniel was staying at the Heathman Hotel downtown, and we agreed to meet at a small coffee shop on Northwest 23rd Avenue, far enough from my neighborhood that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I told Robert I was meeting an old college friend who was in town. Technically, not a lie, but the truth felt like acid in my throat. I changed my outfit 4 times that morning, finally settled on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that Sarah had bought me for Christmas. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My eyes were bright with something I couldn't name. Fear? Excitement? Anticipation? I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, having a full argument with myself. I could still leave. I could text him, say I was sick, that this was a mistake. But my body wouldn't move, because another part of me, the part I'd buried for decades, was screaming that I deserved this. 1 hour. One conversation with someone who saw me as Eleanor, not as Robert's wife or Sarah and Michael's mother or Emma's grandmother. I walked into the coffee shop at exactly 2 o'clock, and there he was. Daniel stood when he saw me, and I watched 38 years fall away from his face. He was thinner than I remembered, distinguished in that way some men get lucky enough to become. The green eyes were the same, though, still intense, still seeing right through me. Eleanor, he said, and my name in his voice felt like coming home. We sat across from each other, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. What do you say to the person you almost married, the person who represents the life you didn't choose? You look exactly the same, he finally said, smiling. I laughed. I look 61, but thank you. No, he said, leaning forward. I mean, you look like you, like the Eleanor I remember. And just like that, we were talking like no time had passed at all. He told me about his divorce 5 years ago, a marriage that had been struggling for a decade, to a woman who wanted different things. No kids, because she'd never wanted them, and he'd convinced himself he didn't either. But now, he said, he wondered if he'd just been protecting himself from the pain of not having them with me. I told him about my children, about Michael, who lived in Seattle and called once a month if I was lucky, about Sarah and Emma, and how being a grandmother should fill this void inside me, but somehow made it worse, because I was watching my daughter begin the same cycle of self-sacrifice I'd lived. Do you love him? Daniel asked suddenly. Your husband. The question hung between us like smoke. Did I love Robert? I'd been married to him for 38 years. We'd raised children together, survived financial struggles, buried his parents and my mother. We had a history, a life, shared memories. But did I love him? I don't know how to answer that, I said finally. I love the life we built. I love that he was there when I needed stability. But do I love him the way I once did? The way I loved... I stopped myself. The way you loved me, Daniel finished. I looked down at my coffee. That was different. We were different people. Were we? Or were we just braver then? If you're listening to this and your heart is racing, if you understand the weight of that question, please subscribe to this channel. Because what I'm about to tell you next is the moment that changed everything. And I still don't know if it was the biggest mistake of my life or the most honest thing I've ever done. We talked for 3 hours, long past the 1 hour we'd agreed on. We talked about the books we'd read, the places we'd traveled, the dreams we'd abandoned, and the ones we still carried. He told me about a building he was designing for a women's shelter, how he wanted it to feel like hope embodied in steel and glass. I told him about the novel I'd started writing again, just 43 old pages plus 17 new ones I'd written in the past few weeks. "Eleanor, you have to promise me you'll finish it," he said, reaching across the table and taking my hand. That touch. That simple gesture, his hand on mine. I felt it everywhere. Felt it like electricity, like awakening, like every cell in my body suddenly remembered what it was to be alive. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. "Come back to my hotel," he said quietly. "Not for, we'll just talk more. I have to fly back tomorrow and I don't want this to end yet." Every alarm bell in my body was ringing. This was the line. This was where it stopped being emotional connection and became something else, something I couldn't take back. "I can't," I whispered. "I know," he said, but his hand stayed on mine. I looked at this man who had once been my whole world, who represented the life I'd chosen not to live. And I looked at my phone, where I had 3 missed calls from Robert. Probably wondering where I was, probably needing me to pick up something from the store, or make dinner, or simply be present in the life I'd committed to. "1 hour," I heard myself say. "We'll talk for 1 hour, and then I have to go home." The look in his eyes should have stopped me. It was hope and hunger, and something deeper, something that recognized me in a way I hadn't been recognized in decades. We walked to his hotel. It was only 3 blocks away, but every step felt momentous, like I was walking toward a cliff edge. Part of me was screaming to turn back. Part of me felt more alive than I had in years. His room was on the 14th floor, overlooking the city. I stood by the window, looking down at the streets below, at people going about their normal lives, not standing in hotel rooms with men who weren't their husbands. "I've thought about you every day for 38 years, Daniel said behind me. "Every single day, I've wondered what you were doing, if you were happy, if you ever thought of me." I turned to face him. Every day is too many days to think about someone you're not with. "Exactly," he said. "So why do we do it? Why do we spend our lives thinking about people we're not with instead of being present with the people we are with?" "Because maybe we're with the wrong people," I said, and the words felt like betrayal and truth all at once. He moved closer, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell his cologne, something woody and expensive that reminded me of the cologne he wore when we were young. "Tell me to leave," I said. "Tell me this is crazy and I should go home to my husband." "I can't," he said, "because I think we both need this, whatever this is." And then he kissed me. If you're still listening, if you haven't judged me and closed this video, please subscribe, because I need you to understand what happened in that moment. It wasn't just a kiss. It was 38 years of wondering and longing and lost possibilities all crashing together. It was remembering what it felt like to be desired, to be seen, to be chosen. We kissed for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. And then I pulled away, my heart hammering, tears streaming down my face. "I can't do this," I said. "I can't. I have a granddaughter. I have a daughter who trusts me. I have a husband who—" I stopped because I couldn't finish that sentence. What did I have with Robert? A routine? A shared history? A marriage that had become more about coexistence than connection? "I know," Daniel said, his voice rough. "I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "No," I interrupted. "Don't apologize, because I wanted it too. That's the problem. I wanted it, and I still want it, and I don't know what that makes me. Human, he said simply. It makes you human. I gathered my things, my hands shaking. I have to go. Eleanor, wait. I turned at the door. Finish your novel, he said. Promise me. Even if we never see each other again, promise me you'll finish it. Don't let yourself disappear again. I nodded, unable to speak, and left. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, crying so hard I thought I might break apart. What had I done? I'd kissed another man. I'd wanted more. I'd stood in that hotel room and considered throwing away 38 years of marriage for a few hours with someone who made me feel alive. And the worst part? I was crying not because I'd done it, but because I'd stopped. When I finally got home, Robert was in the garage, exactly where I'd expected him to be. I walked in, and he barely looked up. You were gone a long time, he said, not accusatory, just stating a fact. Yeah, I said. We had a lot to catch up on. That's nice, he said, turning back to his car. Oh, Sarah called. Something about having dinner together this weekend. I stood there, looking at my husband of 38 years, this man I'd built a life with, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no relief, no connection. Just nothing. And that's when I realized the truth. I hadn't betrayed Robert by kissing Daniel. I'd betrayed myself years ago by staying in a marriage that had slowly erased me, by choosing safety over passion, by letting myself become invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Robert, listening to him snore, and I pulled out my phone. Daniel had sent a message. Thank you for today, for letting me see you again. Whatever you decide to do with your life, remember, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to exist as Eleanor, not just as someone's wife or mother. Finish the novel. Live your life. Be brave enough to choose yourself. I read that message probably 50 times, and then I got up, went downstairs, opened my laptop, and wrote until sunrise. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've written another 80 pages. I've started going to a writing group at the library on Tuesday nights. Told Robert it was a book club. I've been looking at apartments, just looking, just imagining what it might be like to live in a space that was mine alone. I haven't told Daniel any of this. We've only exchanged a few brief messages since that day. Nothing inappropriate, just checking in. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. That kiss unlocked something in me that I can't put back. It reminded me that I'm not just a supporting character in everyone else's story. I'm the main character in my own life, and I've been living like I'm already dead. Subscribe to this channel if you want to know what happens next, because I honestly don't know myself. Sarah is bringing Emma over this afternoon, and I'm supposed to babysit while she goes to a doctor's appointment. Robert is taking his car to a show this weekend. Michael called yesterday for the first time in 6 weeks, asking if we could help him with a down payment on a house. Everyone needs something from me. Everyone expects me to show up and be present and give pieces of myself away like I'm an endless resource. And I'm sitting here at 61 years old, wondering, what do I need? What do I want? If I were to walk away from this life, start over, finish my novel, maybe even call Daniel and see if that kiss was a moment or the beginning of something, would that make me selfish? Or would it make me honest? Last night, Robert and I were having dinner, silent as usual, him reading something on his iPad while eating, and he said, without looking up, "You've been different lately." My heart stopped. Different how? I don't know, more. Here, I guess. Less checked out. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Here? I've never been less here in my entire life. My mind is in a hotel room in downtown Portland, on pages of a novel I'm finally writing, in imagined conversations with a man who sees me as a person, not as a function. But all I said was, "I've been feeling more like myself lately." He nodded, still not looking at me. That's good. And that's when I knew. Robert doesn't want me. He wants the version of me that makes his dinner and does his laundry and doesn't ask him to see her. He's comfortable with my invisibility because it requires nothing from him. This morning, I got another message from Daniel. I'm coming back to Portland next month. Same conference. Will you meet me again? I haven't answered yet, because I know if I see him again, something irreversible will happen. Either I'll finally have the affair I've been emotionally having for months, or I'll tell him I can't do this anymore and lose the only person who makes me feel alive. Or, and this is the scariest option, I'll finally be honest with Robert and blow up the life I've spent 38 years building. So here I am, telling you this story, asking you, what would you do? If you were 61 years old and just remembered what it feels like to be seen, to be desired, to be fully yourself, would you choose safety or truth? Would you stay in a marriage that's comfortable but empty, or risk everything for a chance at something real? I don't have the answer. I'm sitting here with my laptop open, my unfinished novel in front of me, a text message from Daniel waiting for a response, and my husband in the next room who hasn't really looked at me in years. Maybe that's the real question. Is it worse to hurt someone by leaving, or to hurt yourself by staying? Subscribe to this channel, leave me a comment, tell me what you think. Because I have to make a decision, and I genuinely don't know what the right choice is. Or maybe there is no right choice. Maybe there's just the choice to finally, at 61 years old, put myself first. Daniel is waiting for an answer. Robert is oblivious. My family needs me. My novel is waiting to be finished. And I'm standing at a crossroads, terrified and exhilarated, and more alive than I've felt in decades. What would you do in my place?